Hello and welcome to the Slow the Fuck Down podcast with Glow London and The Drum. I'm Emma Harris, Chief of Glow London and founder of the Slow the Fuck Down movement. In May 22, I had a completely out of the blue cardiac arrest and the odds of 96-4 surviving unscathed. Since then, I've been committed to sharing the perspective I'm now blessed with, that many of us are wasting the precious time we have on this planet with unsustainable pace and stress. In a world that's only getting faster, we're here to remind you that slowing down isn't just good for your health. It's about creating the right focus, making the right choices, and most importantly, achieving the life you want both in and out of work. In each episode, I'll welcome some fabulous guests onto the show to share their stories of how slowing down or not has affected their lives, their teams, and their businesses. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Lianre Robinson and Julie Doleman. Lianre is CEO of the Marketing Academy Foundation that helps young talent from disadvantaged backgrounds break into marketing. She's got over 20 years of experience leading global companies including Lad Bible, Liberty and Jack Morton Worldwide. She's also the executive chair of campaigning at Wackle, working hard to accelerate gender equality in advertising, and a proud mentor with the She Says, Who's Your Mama programme. Joining Lianre, we have the amazing Julie Doleman. Julie's a groundbreaking leader in her field. She is a first-generation American who's led global expansion for Experian and transformed the UK team at Entain Digital. She's consistently delivered record-breaking revenue, inspired high-performing teams, championed diversity and mentored the next generation, all while balancing the rewarding challenges of motherhood. So welcome, Lianre and Julie. Thank you for being here. Very excited about today's episode. We will kick off with our question that we always start with, which is, how do you think we've got here? And when I say here, what I mean is in terms of our industry, everywhere we look, people drinking from a fire hose, in this sort of sense of, I think, slight panic and relentlessness. What do you think has created the environment that we're dealing with at the moment?
I'll kick off. I actually think we've always been here, but I think no one was talking about it because our industry has just always been so fast. It's non-stop. It's kind of like go harder, go faster, new, better. Loads have changed in the last few years that I think has just kind of accelerated that. Post sort of COVID and great resignation and constant different shapes of the industry in terms of mergers, acquisitions, different types of businesses. So I think that there's just been a real fastness that's accelerated what the industry's culture was already like. And then I think now people are just talking about it a lot more and also maybe not being willing to put up with it as a status quo anymore. So that's why it's kind of at the forefront.
I'm going to come back to why you think there's been that shift. But Jules, just if you could tell us why you think we've got here.
Yeah, so I agree completely. I also think that we've had a really weird last 5 years, right? So from being sort of trapped in our houses, something that none of us ever in our lifetime thought would happen, to some real uncertainty, politically, real uncertainty, environmentally, and I think people are scared. And when people are scared and people are nervous, strange behaviors start to happen. And I think that people haven't been leaving their jobs because the market is uncertain. And when that happens, oftentimes people will stay and just keep drinking out of the fire hose. And they'll, not make necessary changes because uncertainty drives fear. And I think that that is something that lots of people are feeling right now. But I actually think one of the great parts is that people are talking about it more. And I think you're absolutely right. I don't think this was something that was talked about. It was just expected. We just all crack on with things.
Yeah. That kind of 80s, 90s. I always talk about how, it was cool to go to work ill. It was cool to talk about what hours you worked.
Yeah.
And that has changed. What do you think has created that change? Why is it no longer sort of respectable to be that person?
Do you know, I think there's kind of two main things, actually. I think genuinely it comes a bit with age when you realise that there's no energy in that. There's no flex, right, in that. You're like, why am I doing that? I've really found and enjoyed the power of no in more recent years. And I think, it just kind of comes with age where you go, actually, that wasn't great. And I don't want to keep doing that for another, especially when you realise how many years you've still got to work.
Yes.
And then I also think as well, something that has definitely shifted is the younger generations really showing us that it's not cool. They don't like it. It's not what they're hoping to achieve for themselves. We're not the idols that maybe the people who went before us were kind of pinned up to be, the ones who were, working from like 7 till like midnight, and they're just kind of like, it's not what I want.
That's right.
So I think there's kind of been a bit of a change, a maturing of ourselves, literally and physically, but then also kind of a maturing of the industry with the kind of younger talent coming through, being like, actually, maybe there's a better way.
Yeah. I agree. I remember shamefully as a boss being very, first in, last out, and, expecting people, even if I'd had them in a bar till 5 a.m, expecting them to be in the office at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then there was this new generation, what we call the millennials, and we were all slightly eye-rolly about the fact that their chairs were spinning at 5:30.
Yeah.
And now suddenly we're like, they've got a fucking point.
Yes.
Like they're much more purpose-led than us. They're not money chasers like we were. They're not a status-driven. And, Julie, why do you think they've got this shift? What's created that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think early on in my career, I worked in an environment, and actually one of the sayings was, if you're going to hoot with the owls, you need to soar with the eagles. And so if you're going to be up late, you better still be here first thing the next morning. And that was just something that we lived by. I think that and to be completely honest, eating dinner at your desk was just something that you did. And I actually remember when I came back from my 6-week mat leave in the US after my first daughter, I did say to my boss, my days of eating dinner at my desk are over. And he was like, yeah, absolutely, I support that. And then it became this really interesting thing where I'd race home, I'd do the whole sort of dinner, bath time, bedtime, and then I'd be back online. And it was like, I'll just prove that it's okay. I can go home and do dinner and bath, but then I'll be back online and I'll be on it. And then what would happen is that I'd be back online until the wee hours, and then I couldn't shut it off, and then I couldn't go to sleep, and then I'd wake up and having had no rest, small kids eventually, and it just became this like really crazy vicious cycle. So while I felt like I drew the line to say, I'm not going to be doing this, I'm not going to be eating dinner here anymore, but then I would just, carry on late into the evening anyways. So I do think that was all wrong. And I think this generation, they do expect more of us as leaders, and they expect more from a business culturally. They're not going to do that. They're not going to put up with that.
And good on them.
Yeah, agreed.
Where do you think they've got this shift from? Like, because if they're looking at us, that's not what they're seeing. Do we understand why sort of societally they've created this new wave of living?
I could come up with loads of reasons, but I'm not even sure. I just think that we need to embrace it a little bit, because lots of what you said really resonated with me. I started a brand new job after having my daughter, and I'd been somewhere for nearly 9 years. It was actually quite an inclusive culture. I knew everyone, I'd done every role. There was no reason to leave, but obviously, of course, I left on my maternity leave and started a brand new job in a company that the average age was probably about 10 to 15 younger than me. And I was one of only 2 parents. And it was kind of whispered, like, someone had to leave, if the other one had to leave early to get their child. I was asked in my interview what my childcare plans were. There was a lot, and I was like, I have them, that's all you need to know.
Oh my God.
But one thing that, there were a couple of things I really took. It was definitely a very kind of work hard, play hard culture, and particularly, because of the age of everyone. But at 5:30, everyone got up and left. And I remember seeing it thinking, because I was trying to rush home to do exactly the same, like see my daughter before, bedtime. And I just was like, this is great. And there were 2 things that changed there, like dramatically. Got up and left at 5:30 and never worried about it at all, because that was the culture, and that was mostly how it was. And if there was something important or urgent, people would be available and would make themselves available, but the expectation was work was finished. So I just really embraced that and felt grateful for that, even though some of the things were a bit strange. And then the other thing that they did as well is I just think the way of working was an incumbent. So I used to be really known for having lots of pieces of paper on my desk, like piles of them, like terrible, like printing things out, writing on them. And when I got there, everyone just walked around with their laptops, which sounds hilarious. That sounds strange to me, but it really was, because it actually wasn't like a lot of the places I'd worked in. So I just really embraced that too. And like, I wasn't even connected to the printer for quite a long time. So I just embraced that. I was like,
Brilliant.
right. And it was things like that actually made the kind of whole experience less stressful, like trying to find something on a bit of paper. I kind of, so I think I kind of just adapted to some interesting ways of working and some cultural shifts that I hadn't seen in all the years that I'd been in the industry before that.
Yeah.
But I actually think as a leader, my expectations of my teams are significantly different now. Like, I sort of feel like if you are working late into the evening, you're not managing your time properly during the day.
100%.
I'd much rather see people better time manage over the course of the day and go out and have a life. That is the whole point.
Yeah.
And I think that, so I suppose my expectations have dramatically changed and my style has changed, because that's not what I want either. And, I recently was working in Gibraltar, and Gibraltar has a 37.5-hour work week, which I think is probably quite common in the UK, but it was like a big stated thing, and people really, really stuck to it. And so I thought it was fascinating that I'd kind of look around at 5:30 and be like, oh, I'm the only one here. I mean, they were just like out. But actually, the sun was shining, the days were long, and it was like, brilliant. That's exactly what should happen. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we've got to be slowing the fuck down to speed the fuck up.
Well, and this is the point, right? That I feel like, and these stories are encouraging, and I do think we've got this sort of generation of young people who are much more mindful. There's much more evidence. It's a bit like, well, we used to smoke in the office when I first worked. There's all the evidence and data that shows that kind of working life that we used to live is not sustainable. Yet we are working with a lot of businesses where people are working long hours.
Yes.
Parents are leaving and doing the thing of going home and logging on.
Yes.
People are working at weekends. When I suggest to a lot of people I mentor that working at weekends, there's a boundary there. They're like, well, I wouldn't be able to get through the week if I didn't do a few hours on a Sunday. So that feels like, I think COVID, particularly because of the shift to working online, the expectations that people have now of this always on and always available, people emailing at the weekends, that all those sort of behaviours. I feel, my sense is that that has crept back in.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at in the industry because of the stuff we've talked about, this fear.
Yes.
This fear of redundancies, the economy, the political environment. There's this fear. And how do we change that? What can we do to really make people aware that, athletes don't train 7 days a week. Athletes are aware, either side of a peak as two valleys, that we have to have downtime as part of our performance. How do we get that message out there?
I think for me, one of the things I realised is I actually wasn't kind of happy with it always being, the kind of status quo as it was. But it took a while to realise that, because when you're someone who's, I was thinking about this earlier, it's like the curse of capability, right? When you're someone who's like good and a doer and you're doing well and you're being promoted and things are kind of moving like in the direction they're supposed to, it's actually really hard to then take a step back and be like, but is everything else aligning in the way I want to? Because that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? I'm doing everything I should be doing, right? Yep. And I also really enjoyed everything I was doing. I love my work, love my career, So it was hard to separate. And then what I also realised was, when you are really good, and it sounds like I'm saying I'm so amazing, everyone.
You are.
You can kind of do a lot, and then because you can do a lot, you do a lot.
Yeah.
And then other people know you can do a lot, so they give you a lot. And then it just keeps going. So I think one of the things that is I would kind of urge people to think about is trying to take a little bit of a moment and think of whether what you've currently got is what you want, because when you're in the throes of it, it's really hard to distinguish. And actually sometimes a forced gap can help with that. Like if you kind of go, right, okay, like maternity was a really good one for me, because it made me kind of think, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? Like, what's that opportunity? And it also made me think about when it was time to leave that role, because my expectations and wants for my life had changed. So when I thought that role wasn't really serving me anymore, I made that jump and spent a bit more time with my daughter before I found something new. So I think I'm trying to encourage people to take a bit of a gap and actually think about what it is that they want, and will allow them to see whether what they've got is matching up.
So agree completely. I also think that there's something around, I don't do slow. So I love pace. I get my energy from pace. I get my, I love running a mile a minute and having lots of plans and lots of things going on. And that's all fine and good. But something, your body is taking a toll completely. And I would say that you might love what you're doing and you might be, get your energy from all of the activity going on and from saying yes to everything. And then all of a sudden you look around and you go, oh my God, I'm actually unwell. And I had a global role and was doing long haul travel every couple of weeks. And it was, 7 days. And I used to pride myself in the fact that I'll land Saturday morning, 6 a.m. I'll be home in time for the football match. I've already planned the birthday party that's that afternoon. And, I'd pat myself on the back that, man, I can do it all. And, then I looked in the mirror and thought, oh my God, like I could not be any more unhealthy than I am. And so there was this all of a sudden need to go, yep, I might think I'm ticking all the boxes, but my body's taking a toll. And so it became this need to go, wait, I actually have no other choice because I want to live to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I want to really live long and happy and enjoy these kids and this life that I've built. And I was doing everything opposite of that, but, patting myself on the back in the meantime. And I think that there's a real need to just continue to stop and take stock and really understand sort of what your criteria is. So to your point, what are your must-haves? I talk a lot about in, coaching people and doing a whole bunch of, advisory work that, what are your must-haves personally and professionally? And, that your must-haves are not your nice-to-haves, but it's really identifying 5 or 6 things that you have to have. And when you sacrifice too many of those things, it becomes a bit of a disaster, but really holding yourself accountable to those things and holding other people accountable to it as well. And I do think that's our job as leaders, to go, wait, hang on, let's take some stock. Let's make sure that, you're doing all of the right things to keep you fulfilled both personally and professionally.
100%. There's so much evidence about people who are prioritizing their own mental and physical well-being.
Yes.
They're much more productive. I think it's about 25% more productive.
Yes.
I think that's the myth, that this running is actually productive, but it's actually bullshit.
Yeah.
Because at some point, like happened to you, and I'd like to hear a bit more about that, but it certainly happened to me, your body keeps the score.
Yeah.
And at some point you will crash.
Yeah.
And you will stop being productive. I was talking to someone recently who was saying that they think that their boss is about to burn out because she's forgetting things, like there's some behaviors going on, and she's always been someone who's just run, and at some point it will stop you.
Yeah.
Recently, I heard a story. Interestingly, I was presenting my Slow the Fuck Down keynote to a group of marketing academy scholars, and one of them talked about how the fact that, because at the beginning I asked these 3 questions of, if you're on top of your messaging, stay standing. If you're on top of your well-being, balance, stay standing. If you're on top of your well-being, stay standing. And she was one of the people that stood standing. And she said, she thought, oh, I don't need to listen to this talk because I don't need to slow the fuck down. But she said someone had said to her, in fact, Sherilyn Shackle had said to her, just listen. Even if you don't you think you need every talk, just listen. So she wrote loads of notes, and she's found out about 3 weeks after that she's done loads and loads of long haul flights, and she's got a blood clot in her lung. This is someone who plays sport 5 times a week, and she's found out she got, and she said she literally ran home, opened her notes and read all the stuff that I talked about. And bless her, I was going to get choked now, but she said that I've helped her get through the last 4 weeks since she's found out that, she said, hearing Emma's learnings and having that in the front of my mind has helped me cope with the last 4 weeks. Now, this is someone you would never look at and say, you know, even herself, she didn't see that. So at some point we have to know, even if we think we're doing the right thing in the moment, slowing down is speeding up. It is doing better, because at some point the body will keep the score.
I was just going to say, because you're both going to make me cry also, so we'll move on. But I think tools are really, really helpful. So you were talking about how she was able to go back into that, you know, her toolbox and get something to support her. Something that me and my husband started a little while ago, because he's an agile coach, and we did it as a bit of a joke, but then I've kept it up, was doing a retro on our own lives, right? So a little retrospective. But what it did is it made us kind of think about goals in all areas of life, which people don't do very often, because they focus quite a lot on career. So we had goals for our family and home and our daughter, and, you know, as well as goals for our own individual careers, as well as goals for different things, you know, financial security, lots of different things. But that started as a bit of a joke, but we've done it quite a few times, and it's been really helpful, because it starts to kind of sometimes manifest things into reality, but it also really helps you make sure that you're giving priority and weight to lots of different things in your life, rather than the thing that just is kind of driving and bringing in the money, which is a lot of the time from work. So so that might be something that people can try, like, you know, it doesn't have to be as formal as a retro, but, you know, setting yourself some nice kind of like life goals and thinking about those around your health, around spending time with your family, and checking in on how you're doing on them.
Well, one of my headlines that I talk about all the time is work out what matters and prioritise it. Yeah. Because often, because of the hamster wheel we're on, driven by this sort of fear of how we are operating on this sort of unconscious negative belief system, because of that, we think we're protecting the thing that's most important. So we think that we are working really hard for the sake of the family and our loved ones, but we're missing out on those bath times, on those bedtimes. I was always the mum that missed the school trips. The last Friday I was there making yogurt with year 3. And it was, I tell you, I don't know how those teachers do it, but I was there. And it's like prioritising that sort of stuff, because he's 8 now, he's going to be 18 in a minute. And I nearly left him as a 5-year-old. So what's more important?
I went to a talk many years ago at my daughter's school, and there was a child psychologist, and she did this powerful exercise that I'm never, ever going to forget. And it did change my behavior, where she was talking about how our kids are very lonely because of the fact that parents are always on the phone. Parents are always racing around. Parents are always trying to get to meetings, or, you know, oh, I'm just going to get to one more email. And so she did this exercise, and it was about 200 parents. And she said, I want you guys to raise your hand if between the hours of 5:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m., you will, and it's okay if the answer is yes, you will get fired if you do not answer an email or check your phone. Raise your hand. And, you know, everybody was a bit rustly in their seats, and no one raised their hand. And she said, okay, now raise your hand if you don't look at your phone between 5:30 and 9:30, and you're just present at home, whether it's with kids or just, you know, doing things for yourself. If you don't actually respond to work emails or texts, will you die or will anyone else die? Raise your hand. And like one guy did, he was like, well, I'm like an ER doctor. And she's like, okay, you're the only one that's excused. But the reality was that nobody could raise their hands. And so the amount of time that we spend, oh, I just got to get this one last email done. Oh, I just got to get this one last text done. Do we really? And the answer to that is no. And so the amount, and what this woman was also saying is that, you know, your child is, or your teenager for that matter, they're only going to come up to you twice. And when you go, just one more minute, let me just finish this email, let me just finish this text, they'll go away and they won't come back. And so there's something really powerful about that reminder, which is, do I really need to be doing this right now? And I think that encouraging each other and holding ourselves accountable to that stuff is really important.
So important. And it's that exact thing. It's the FUPO I talk about. Fear of other people's opinion. That pressure is there. No doubt things are tough. That pressure exists. Yet how much are we layering on top of the pressure by creating catastrophes in our own mind that don't exist? 100%. If I don't do that now, so that's something I talk about all the time, interrupting our behavior by deciding, is this really important, or am I imagining a disaster that's never going to happen.
Yes.
And that is the biggest change in me since my cardiac arrest, that I will make decisions in the moment based on reality. I will be present. I will not succumb to that fear. Another great story. Sorry, Leanne, I can see you.
No, I'm loving the story.
Forgive me, brand. I think it was Johnson & Johnson, but I can't remember, who did this piece of content where they got all these grown-ups, the parents, to say, who's in your like ideal dining, like dinner party? Who would you like to have if in a sort of perfect fantasy dinner party? And they're all saying Nelson Mandela, Beyonce, like all these like iconic, Maya Angelou. And then they get the kids in the room, and without fail, all of them say, my mum, my dad. And you've got the parents sort of watching, the video of the kids and expecting them and knowing they've said, Michael Jackson, and expecting the kids to say, that they want to meet their heroes, and they just all say, my mum, my dad, my family. And you can see the parents. I'm going to get emotional, but, we're living in this world where we're forgetting the things that are most important.
Yeah.
They just want the time. No.
Yeah.
They just want the time. I think I really realised that in COVID, because I, like everyone, sort of like glued to the laptop, working remotely, desperately trying to keep business alive, and also simultaneously keep my job, and also simultaneously kind of rapidly progressing in my own role as well. It was quite a busy time, but it took a big toll. It took a toll on all of us. And whilst we didn't say it out loud, but we kind of backed me in that moment where things were moving forward and going in a direction that I wanted to grab and stuff like that. But it actually did have a real impact, and there were like little things I remember where my husband and my daughter suddenly had these in-jokes, and I was like, when did you two become a comedy duo? And obviously I love it, but then I was like, oh, and it's because they were eating dinner together every night.
Yeah.
And I was there. I was there still in the bedroom on the laptop. And I remember there were things like that where I was like, absolutely, no more, like coming out the other side of that. And it was a bit like a fog clearing where I was like, okay, this needs to readjust, because I felt like I started off quite well with the balance, in that new role and really thinking about it, and then just, going into something different, which was different, and needed different energy. I just kind of veered off quite drastically. So I was like, okay, how do I bring this back closer together? But just starting with little things as well, like making sure that I was protecting some of that post-work, post-school time. So I didn't just slide into the evening, but it's still on my laptop, and we'd have that. And there was a real moment, I remember we went up a year in school, and the books that they sent home just suddenly became 3 times longer. And there was this thing where we'd left reading the book too long, and we were like, oh, we've got to read the book. And I was like, how many pages are in this? Right, and we got through the whole book, we did it all, and then my husband literally said to me, he goes, I just had a moment there thinking you never would have had the time for that before.
Love that.
To reel that whole, who's watching, because it was so long.
I remember, doing it in the back of the car.
On the way
so long. I don't care if you just say, we've got to hand it in today.
We've got to.
The panic. The panic.
But
that stuff's so important. There's such a direct correlation between children who have, or families, even if you haven't got kids, even just as partnerships, who have family dinners and mental health.
Yes.
It's a direct correlation. And again, that's something I did not prioritise. I also, culturally, my husband grew up in a family where they've cooked loads of food and then they eat when they're hungry. And I grew up in every night we eat together. And that's something I've said, right, that's a non-negotiable.
Yes. Yeah.
We will eat together 5-6 times a week. And prioritising that, and I make sure that my diary works around that. So, making sure those things are important, are prioritised, so important.
Yeah, agree.
So, question for both of you. You've sort of alluded to it. We're talking before about when you were doing all those transatlantic journeys. Has there been a point where you think you've gone too far and been either at burnout or close to burnout and had to really pull yourself back from that?
Yeah, definitely, and I sort of alluded to it earlier. A point of kind of starting a new role where my own role in the business kind of changed quite rapidly, and I joined as sort of heading up the client services and became CEO. By the time I left, we went through an acquisition. It was a very busy time. It was also COVID. So I think I started 1 month before COVID. So had to do all of that and build all of my relationships on Zoom. And I think I'm way more charming in real life. So that was a journey. And then, ripping up the rule book on everything that you knew about kind of growing a business and leading teams and trying to figure it all out again in like a crazy world on a screen, whilst everyone's like, are we going to make it? And, literally, are we going to make it? Because, there's a pandemic and everything that came after. So it was a completely volatile time, and unprecedented for our lifetimes, combined with actually quite a big change in the way that my own career journey was going and things like that. And then also still had a very young family. And still kind of working out all of those dynamics and shifts. And I think all of those things combined meant that actually I was for quite a long time operating in not a good and healthy space and never sort of prioritised myself or my well-being, and was always exhausted, like genuinely on the weekends, sometimes like thinking like, how am I going to get up? And just not having any time for anything fun or health-wise. And all of those things kind of just sort of got to a point as well, particularly as I was getting ready to leave that business. I just was like, actually, I just don't want this anymore. Like, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to constantly feel like that. I think it's possibly only going to change even more as I slide sort of melting face emoji into perimenopause. And you just notice that things are different, right? And I just thought, not only do I not have I can see where this is going to end badly if I kind of go into something. So, but what was really great is I just had a moment of pause, and what helped me was that it was almost like kind of having like dark glasses lifted off. I was just suddenly like, oh my gosh, I can totally see, now that I've got a moment to think, I can totally see what it is that I need to do, or what I need to try and focus on changing. And I did. I focused really heavily on prioritising health and prioritising well-being, and I treated it like a project, because we all know how to manage a project.
Brilliant.
So I took kind of like some steps, because it feels really big, right? It's like, how am I going to change my whole way of being, right? And it's like, well, actually, I'm just going to try and figure out what's the problem. My first problem was every time I exercised, I had like a recurring knee injury, and it would flare up, and there were various different things. I was like, do you know what? And I started thinking about it. I went and did some hardcore physio. They found out I had an ankle problem and a hip problem, and really straightened me out. But it meant that actually by the time I started a new exercise regime, which was stage 2 in the project, I was actually much stronger, so I didn't kind of feel like I had to give up, like too early. But yeah, kind of treated it like a project, gave myself the right to believe that it was as important as also thinking about career, what next, and things like that, and just spent proper time on it. And then I also spoke it into existence. So I would say to people, I'm doing the physio, I need to do this, I can meet you after X, because then I made it important and part of the conversation. And then I think it kind of gave people space to also say their own things, because they'd be like, oh yeah, I'd really need to do that. What are you doing? Or someone would be like, oh, I love that too, and so I tried to, like I said, but really think about it, have that moment, take it in stages, and then also talk about it in order to kind of give it, make it more valid and make me stick to it, right?
Yeah.
And I put some time and some money behind it, which then also makes you stick to it. So yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Love that. Really clear, tangible things. Yeah. Approach it like a project. Yeah. Tell everyone about it. Love that.
I want to add 2 things to that. One, just as we talk about sort of tangible things, because that's always what I want to hear and learn from all of you brilliant people. I think part of saying it out loud and having people who help hold you accountable, super important. And it's actually not that hard to do. And, my gorgeous friend sitting next to me is one of my accountability partners, along with the amazing Sophie Devonshire. And every Friday, which usually seeps into Saturday or Sunday or Monday for me, but every single week we have a WhatsApp group, and we sort of put out there what went well over the week. But it isn't just what went well. It's what went well, what we're struggling with. We're quite vulnerable on it. And it's this idea that you don't have to do it. It's voluntary, but actually it is about accountability. And it is about, I really want this change, and whatever I'm trying to achieve, or whatever Emma's trying to achieve, we sort of put it out there, and you put it out into the universe, and then your friends help hold you accountable. And I think that's a really, really important piece to this. I think the other thing, just if I think about some really tangible tips, one of the things that I'm happy didn't go back to normal for me, when the cloud of COVID was lifted, is that I was in a global role. I had teams all over the world. I was working from home for the first time in my life, as most of us were, and I was working in my bedroom because all these other people had, the rooms in my home. And so, here I am. I wake up in the morning, and there's my computer in my bedroom, horrendous, and then I'm working these ridiculous hours because I had people all over the world. So I didn't get to do any of this sort of fun Zooms, with friends and games and all that, because I was just like, I'm over it. I can't look at myself on the screen anymore. But so there was a few habits and rituals that I was really committed to. It felt like there was like a line for our Peloton bike in the morning of people who were in my house were wanting to exercise, but I was the first one on it because I'm like, no, I have to do this. I have to get myself moving. I have to take, even if it was 5 minutes. And I think what I've learned over the years is that, just slowing down doesn't have to be that you run to you all of a sudden completely stop or move at a snail's pace, but actually take 5 minutes, take small bite-sized chunks of whatever I'm trying to achieve. Take 5 minutes and go outside for a walk. Everybody has that, right? So this idea that I'm running too fast, I don't have time for exercise. You know what? You can walk around the block for 5 minutes. You can go walk around your house for 5 minutes, but just holding yourself accountable. And I'm really committed to that right now, which is, you know what? Even if I can only exercise a 10 or a 15-minute exercise, that is what I do. And I started that in COVID and I didn't stop. And I'm really sort of proud of that. I totally agree with you running it like a project. I think we all are really good at that. And, I mentioned the criteria before. I sort of hold myself accountable to these things because actually when I don't, I feel like shit. Yeah. And I don't want to feel like shit. I want to feel good. But I know in order to do that, I have to hold myself accountable to what I'm trying to achieve. And that's not always easy. And I'm not always successful at it. In fact, oftentimes I'm not successful at it, but it's okay, great. So what am I going to do to change that? And I think that, I just think that there's really small bite-sized chunks that my favorite analogy that, if my daughter was here, she would roll her eyes at. But, the whole idea of eating an elephant, you can't eat an elephant whole. You have to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So take those small bite-sized chunks, but knowing that those small bite-sized chunks can have a massive, massive impact.
100%. And it's consistency as well.
Yeah.
Totally. So that's something we talk a lot about is even if it is 10 minutes, if you're doing that 10 minutes 5 times a week, that is going to make a massive difference. And these are high performance habits.
Yes.
I genuinely think since we've been doing the accountability piece, that everything that's working for me is grounded in that, because great, we're sharing it with each other. But the biggest benefit is I'm doing it for myself.
That's right.
I'm holding myself to account, even if it's because I know at some point I've got to put it on a WhatsApp. But even in doing that sharing, I'm going, I did do another week of 3 workouts and 2 yoga sessions.
Yes.
I did that. I did deliver on what are the things I was going to say. So there are choices. That's the thing. It's all about choice.
I could not agree more on that one. I think I had a WhatsApp from a friend, very high performing. We were having a very early morning WhatsApp because we just check in, I've been a friend for years. And I said, I'm just running into Pilates, because I tell anyone who will listen that I've been doing reformer Pilates, which was one of my stages of exercise. I know. God. I've also I did the exercise bike, which I have found the easiest thing to build a habit around, because you can do it in front of the TV, do it in the morning. I sometimes even do my little emails on it. So then I don't stay up late doing them. I just do it in the morning while I'm but it's not a Peloton though. It's about £100 one from Argos, which is, and it squeaks a little bit, but it's working. But she just sort of said, I've got no time for that at the moment, and I'm really, really feeling it. And I said, we need to talk about that actually, because I do think it's a choice that I have now prioritised it. And like I said, spoke it into existence. When I arrange things, I make sure that I don't book it just like in the middle of the day, like when I can't do any work, but I do say, I've got Pilates in that morning, so we can do the call at this time, right? I really have tried to kind of create space for it so I can keep some level of routine up, also being flexible to life,
Yeah, totally.
But I think that the kind of especially when you are working at home, and a lot of people do still have some hybrid working, there is a way. So being able to sort of like try and eat the elephant slowly, break it down and go, okay, what's the one thing that I would like to do? I want to just build in 15 minutes for a walk, like you say, around the block every day, blocking that out in your diary as a meeting so nothing goes in over it. Yeah. And when people say, can you do this thing? No, actually I can't. I'm busy at that time. Yeah, I can do it at this time. And then go for your walk and just start building that habit. And then once you have built that habit, it'll be easier to kind of build in some of the other things. But I really felt when that message sort of landed, because not that I've solved it all, but I know I'm on the other side of that bit. Yeah. And that's kind of something that I really hope to just get started.
Yeah. Well, my only thing I do on a Sunday, I don't agree with working at the weekends. I think it's really important to have that downtime in order to then have the uptime. Yeah. But I do spend about 20 minutes planning the week, and I plan when I exercise. And I put that in the diary. Yep. And I plan, I think I've said this before, I plan what I wear, which really helps. Just minimise the stress in the morning.
I need to start doing that.
Yes, it's a really good habit.
I got out of habit because I just basically spent 2 years, 3 years at home in shorts, and only something. I used to work in shorts, just something smart enough on top. And I just really got out of the habit of having to dress myself properly to leave the house.
It's a good one. It's almost like having a stylist, because I look and I go, that's brilliant. I completely forget, obviously, because I can forget everything. And then I look at my list and I'm like, genius, because I check the weather. It's all very coordinated. Anyway, well, sadly, we're nearly out of time. I just have one final question for you both. For the people listening, you've given us a lot. What's the one thing, if there are people listening who are thinking, I feel like I'm heading for this kind of burnout, what's the one thing you think that they could do differently to help them slow the fuck down?
I would say that unpack exactly what you're doing, and really, really ask yourself the question. If you can't say hell yes, you should say no, and be confident in the no. I think that, you've taught me a lot about FOMO and FUPO and lots of other fabulous acronyms. And to your point, I don't know if it's age, or with age comes wisdom and confidence, but I'm very confident in saying no. And I think that is something to hold yourself accountable to. So really challenge yourself. If you can't say hell yes, say no.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm always quoting Warren Buffett. The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no most of the time. Yeah. So there's a lot of power in that. Again, this is not about doing less. This is about being better. Lianre.
A couple of things I've said already, but I would probably say, first off, give yourself the permission to accept that this is really important, because when it's us, we tend to deprioritize ourselves and prioritize everything else. So the first thing you have to do is to actually say, no, this is important. True. I've got to change it. This is my number one priority now over the next few months, is to work something out. Then treat it like a project. I found that really helpful. I said it earlier, just because I broke it down, I thought I worked out how I could eat the elephant, although I don't want to eat any elephants, just so everyone knows. But I worked out how I could do that, and then I got started, which I think then was really important, because it just feels really overwhelming. But actually, I just got started. I was like, book a physio appointment and go and see them, talk about the problems, then move forward from there. And now here I am, fresh from Reformer Pilates, my Argos exercise bike that squeaks. But yeah, it's like a whole new world.
Brilliant. Love that. You have both been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed this as much as me. And we've got lots and lots of ways that we can all help ourselves and the people we work with and the people we love to slow the fuck down. Thank you for listening to the Slow the Fuck Down podcast with Glow London and The Drum. If you found this episode interesting and insightful, please help us spread the word by giving us a follow or sharing it with your friends. And if you feel inclined to give us a quick review, that would be awesome. Let's all do what we can to help the world slow the fuck down.